Lockdown Horror Story. This story is about a thief named Alan who used to rob houses along with his two partners. Alan had been eyeing one particular house for a few days. Nobody ever visited that house except for a caretaker. One night, he saw the caretaker leave the house with a packed suitcase. The caretaker seemed a bit scared. It seemed as if he was stressed about something and was leaving the house in a haste. Alan had a perfect opportunity to rob the house, but his partners were far away from the city that night. He didn't want to miss this golden opportunity, so he broke inside the house all by himself. The entire place was dark. He lost the network of his phone the moment he entered the house. When Alan went further inside, he found everything was scattered around. Moreover, there was a very strange smell in that house, as if something had been rotting for years. Alan wasn't able to stand that smell. He quickly started filling his bag with whatever valuables he could see. And that's when a gust of wind pushed open the bedroom door of the house. Alan could hear some people from inside the bedroom. He got scared for a moment, but when he entered the room, there was nobody there. The sound was actually coming from the TV. He thought that the caretaker would have left it on by mistake. Alan started searching the bedroom. He found a locker in the cupboard. He broke it and started taking out all the money and jewelry inside it. While he was taking the money, he heard someone's footsteps coming up the stairs. This time, Alan got horrified. He quickly closed the cupboard and hid under the bed. And soon, the sound of the footsteps stopped, but the strange smell got even stronger. Alan was looking from under the bed, and no one had entered the room. He gathered courage and came out, but as soon as he came out from under the bed, he was shocked. What he saw made him scream out of fear and ran out of the room. In that room, just above the bed under which Alan was hiding, the body of a woman hung from the fan. He left his bag and ran straight towards the main door, but the door was jammed. In fact, none of the other doors in the house would even open. Alan was terrified. He again heard the sound of approaching footsteps. He tried hard to get out of the house, but neither the window would break nor any door would open. He was stuck in this house with that dead body. He could not understand what to do. When Alan looked at the stairs, he saw a shadow slowly coming towards him. And seeing that shadow, he started running from it. And while running, his body slammed against a door. The door opened, and Alan, scared of that shadow, went straight inside that door. It was the door to the basement, but was very dark, and Alan couldn't see anything. Suddenly, someone started banging that door. Alan's foot slipped in panic, and he fell straight down the stairs and reached the basement of the house. Alan still wasn't able to see anything. He frantically moved his hands and legs here and there, and luckily he found a candle and matchsticks right next to it. And just when he lit the candle, he saw that there was a woman standing right in front of him. It was the same dead body he saw in the bedroom. And the woman blew out the candle, and the room went dark again. Just then, Alan fainted. 2 days later, his partners came searching for him. They found him unconscious in the basement. Alan's head was severely injured, and there were scratch marks all over his body, and was admitted to a hospital. Later, he came to know that there lived a woman or man in the house who had committed suicide by hanging herself from that ceiling fan. Alan then understood that the night he actually did encounter that dead woman's spirit.
I'm a 21-year-old male, but already so many things have happened to me. I'm always scared when I'm alone somewhere or at night because after all what happened, I don't know what could come next. I will tell you guys 1 to 2 early stories, and if you'll be interested, I'll tell everything. Some may sound very unbelievable, but trust me, everything is true. 1999. The first encounter, my mother told me this one, and I was just a newborn. My mother was making dinner in the kitchen and I was sleeping in my room upstairs. She had the baby phone on and she can hear me when I wake up. She heard crying through the baby phone, so she went upstairs to check on me. I was still sleeping and she got very confused. She went back to the kitchen and heard the crying again. Checked on me again, but I was still sleeping. She turned off the baby monitor because she thought maybe it's broken. She went to the kitchen and nothing happened for like an hour. Then she heard the crying again through the phone and she started to freak out. She ran upstairs and I was still sleeping and the baby monitor was still turned off. She took me downstairs because she was really scared at this point. She called my father and told him the story and told him to come home. As she was waiting for him with me in her arms, she heard the crying again through the baby monitor, but this time it was different. It started out as a baby cry, but slowly went to a deep, louder voice, and by the end it was just a loud, deep shouting. My mom almost passed out, but she stayed strong to protect me. She ran out of the house and waited for my father, who arrived a few minutes later. After this, nothing happened for like 3 years, but this was just the beginning. 2003, I was 4 years old. I remember some parts of this, but mostly my mom told me what happened. I was playing with my mom in the living room at night because my father always came home late from work, but we always waited for him. We had a great time as always, but then it happened again. I saw a tall woman in a black dress. I wasn't scared at all, actually. I was very calm, and I asked my mother, "Who's the tall lady, Mommy?" "What lady are you talking about, son?" "The one standing in the corner." She started to freak out a little bit, but didn't take it too seriously as I was only 4 and very creative. "There's no one else here, I promise you." "But she's standing right behind you, Mom." Then she really started to freak out, but still kept it together so I wouldn't see that she was scared. She stepped back to show me that no one was there. "See? There's no one here, just the 2 of us." "But I can see her, Mom. She's right behind you. Now she's looking very angry at you." My mom didn't know what to say at this point. My father arrived home before she could say anything. She said right before my father opened the door, she felt a very cold breath on her neck.
Did we scare you? Tell us in comments, and don't forget to press the subscribe button for awesome horror stories.
A newly married couple, Stella and Philip, were going towards the hills for their weekend outing when it started raining heavily and their car got stuck in a pothole. They got out of the car and saw that there was some issue with the car's engine. They tried a lot, but the car just wouldn't start. They saw an old cottage near the highway. It was quite late in the night and the rain was pouring down like anything. They thought that they'll spend the night in the cottage and will leave for Hills the next morning after getting their car repaired. Due to the rain, they were covered with mud. When they got a room, they found that the shower in the bathroom was not working. They called the reception several times, but nobody picked up. Philip got very angry, and he walked down to the reception and found that the receptionist had plugged in his earphones and was watching something on his phone. He snatched away the phone and started giving him a piece of his mind. While he was shouting at the receptionist, his wife Stella heard the sound of water that was coming out of the shower. When she went to the bathroom, she found that the shower was working. She thought the problem was solved, so she closed the door to take a shower. While she was taking bath, she could hear the main door of the hotel room open, and she assumed that Philip would have returned. She heard a knock on the bathroom's door, and she told Philip that she's inside and will be out in a bit. But the intensity of the knocks increased. Stella thought that the noise of the water is too high, and maybe that's why her voice is not being heard outside. She tried turning off the shower, but the knob won't work. Suddenly, water coming out of the shower turned black, and Stella quickly wrapped a towel around herself. The steam of the hot water had filled the bathroom, and it had all become hazy in there. When Stella removed the curtains, she found that the bathroom was already open. She found it very strange. As soon as she went forward to close the door, she felt that someone was holding her from behind. The lights of the bathroom also started to flicker. She panicked and turned around. She could have never imagined the light she saw. The running water from the shower had turned into a big black shadow like a demon. Stella screamed out of fear. Listening to her scream, Philip came running to the bathroom. He found that the door was already open and Stella was lying unconscious on the floor. When Philip removed the bathroom curtains, he didn't see anybody. However, he had found a knife kept at a corner of the bathtub. He got really scared. He picked up the knife, and the moment he turned, he saw a horrifying reflection of himself in the mirror. Seeing this, he dropped the knife from his hand, and when he looked at the mirror again, everything had turned to normal. He quickly took Stella to bed and put some clothes on her. When Stella regained consciousness, she told him everything that had occurred in the bathroom. They ordered a taxi and left the hotel the same night to return back to their home. Till today, they haven't been able to figure out what exactly happened in the hotel last night. Was it some murderer or rapist, or was it some evil spirit that is haunting them till date? What do you think?
The Haunted Bungalow. In the 1980s, there was a complicated case in a court of England where it took the judge a long time to decide whether the criminal was a human or a ghost. The story is about a businessman named Victor and his wife Jenny. It had been a long time since Victor and Jenny were married, and they had recently moved to England. They bought an old bungalow. Before Victor and Jenny started living there, the family that had resided in the bungalow died under mysterious circumstances. People said that whoever lived in that bungalow never survived. One night, Victor and Jenny had a fight. Victor was mad at Jenny, so he went to the study and started reading a book. He found a very old book with the title, Talking to a Ghost. Victor started reading the book, and while he was reading, he felt someone was standing beside him and staring at him. Frightened, he looked around, but he couldn't find anyone. The book read that in ancient times, people used to burn pieces of glass and chant mantras to call a ghost. He was reading the book when suddenly he heard Jenny scream. He left the book and ran towards Jenny. He found Jenny holding a photograph in her hands. Jenny couldn't stop screaming. When Victor saw the photo, it was him, holding a cup of coffee in the photo. The photo was from 2 weeks ago. But he didn't understand what there was to scream about. Because Jenny wouldn't stop screaming, Victor gave her sleeping pills and put her down to bed. Victor was a little anxious after reading that book, and he started roaming around the bungalow. While he was roaming around, he came to the basement of the bungalow. It seemed as if the basement had burned down long back. When he reached the corner of the basement, he found a few pieces of burnt glass. Victor felt very uneasy and thought of leaving the basement. The moment he turned to go, he saw 5 dead bodies that were staring at him. The dead bodies were completely burnt. But suddenly all of them got up. The dead bodies shouted, "Run away!" Frightened, Victor asked, "What are you talking about?" That's when all the dead bodies went mum and just kept staring back at him. Victor once again inquired what they were talking about, but still, the dead bodies stood still. That's when Victor realized that the dead bodies weren't staring at him, but looking at someone standing behind him. Victor quickly turned behind and found a very terrifying being looking at him. The ghost was holding the same burnt piece of glass that Victor saw in the corner a while back. Victor at once ran away from the basement and went to his bedroom. When he entered the bedroom, he found Jenny sleepwalking and writing something on the wall. Victor told Jenny that they'll have to leave immediately, but Jenny went on writing something with a piece of glass. When Victor went near her, he saw that the photo frame, which Jenny had been looking at and all but gone crazy, was broken near the bed. Victor was now able to see something in that photo that probably made Jenny scream. In that photo, a spirit was choking Victor and Jenny was lying unconscious next to him. Victor got terrified, and he tried a lot to wake up Jenny, but she went on writing on the wall. She had written, "This is the house of the dead. Go away." Victor managed to pick her up in his arms and started running out of the bungalow. The moment he reached the stairs, he thought someone is strangling him by the neck. Jenny slipped out of Victor's hands and fell down the stairs. Victor, too, fainted. After a few hours, when Victor regained consciousness, he saw that Jenny's head was badly hurt. He took her to the hospital, but it was too late. Jenny was dead, and the police arrested Victor for Jenny's murder. Victor's lawyer told the entire story to the judge in the courtroom. He told that the family that lived in the bungalow before Victor and Jenny had also died under mysterious circumstances. But when the police investigated, they neither found the piece of glass in the basement, nor did they find anything written on the wall of the bedroom. Even that photo was placed properly on their dressing table. The only thing they found was the book which Victor was reading. When the judge heard all this, he came to the conclusion that it was all a made-up story by Victor. The judge declared Victor guilty, and in a few days, his death sentence was executed. What people said proved to be true. No one who lived in that bungalow ever survived. What do you think? Did Victor really kill his wife? Or was it a ghost all along?
If you like this story, then subscribe to our channel, Bloody Monday Horror Stories, for some spine-chilling horror stories.
It was the 4th of July. This happened to me when I was 16 years old. It was a Thursday night, and my family and I were going to the golf course that was open to the public to see fireworks. It was a very famous and well-known spot for people to have a nice night to enjoy their 4th of July evening. We got there around 8 o'clock, and the fireworks would be starting at 9 o'clock, which meant that us kids had about an hour or so to do whatever we wanted. By now, there were at least 3,000 people here with blankets, food, chairs, and there were a lot of kids running around with glow sticks. We immediately knew that we were going to wander off, but we also knew we had to stay close by. My mom said that my sister and I could go off on our own if we wanted to, but we needed to be back 10 minutes before the show. My sister was 9 at the time, which meant that I'd be watching her all the time, no matter what we were doing. We ended up going far enough to the point where we couldn't see the people anymore, and I was pretty sure we were now somewhere that either wasn't part of the event or some private property. However, that's when both of us noticed a small trail through the tree line. Considering this was near a national park, we still had about another 30 minutes before we had to go back, and figured to walk through the trail would be nice. It was getting darker. We got into the trail with flashlights on our phone. We were babbling about random stuff. I gave my sister the 10-minute warning. That's when she pointed at something slowly creeping along the tree. We started walking back to the event venue, but something followed us, as we could clearly hear footsteps approaching us. We didn't look back, but my sister stopped suddenly. She felt as if someone grabbed her leg. When I turned behind, what I saw shook me to my core. I could see no one, but just a hand grabbing the ankle of my little sister. When I pointed my mobile phone flashlight in that direction, I saw pieces of a girl's body moving and slowly crawling towards us. The girl's face was hanging off the tree, which scared the shit out of me. I told my sister that it was time to go, grabbed her hand, and ran out of the trail as fast as we could. The fireworks had already started. We got back to my parents, but didn't say a word to them. The next day, I explained to my parents what I'd seen, and my dad called the police and reported the time and location as to what I saw. A week later, the police told my mom that a man thought his girlfriend had been cheating on him and murdered her in the house while she had been asleep. He cut her into pieces and left it in the forest area. My mother revealed this to me years later, and I couldn't say a word. That girl's face, which I saw that night, still haunts me sometimes.
So this one time my parents had left for work. My sister had gone to school, and I, a 20-year-old female, was alone at home. My neighborhood is in a fairly secluded area, situated on top of a huge hill, so it's fairly rare to have anyone visit. I was lounging around, watching TV, when I heard the doorbell ring. I never really answered the door, as, again, we never have anyone visiting in the first place, and my family obviously knows how to get in the house themselves. So I just ignored it, even when it rang a second time. By the third time, I was a little bit annoyed, and I tiptoed over to the front door. The front entrance of our house is essentially a big wooden door, surrounded by walls, so there isn't any way for us to sort of check who's on the outside, unless we go to our piano room and check out the window. This means, though, that there's also no way for anyone on the outside to know if we were there, unless we're stomping around in the house or something. So I stood behind the front door, waiting for the person to leave. I mean, no one has answered your third doorbell ring, right? Surely you'd leave. Suddenly, though, there was a heavy banging on the door which made me jump. And then I heard a deep man's voice speak from the other side of the door. "I know you're in there." My heart jumped and got caught in my throat, and for a second I'm just sort of looking around, trying to figure out how the man knew. After a long silence, I heard muffled chatter, then the sound of footsteps leaving. I didn't dare open the door in case they actually hadn't left, but afterwards I called my parents to check if anyone was meant to be visiting. And no, not that they knew of. I was a little bit surprised by the odd encounter, I'll admit, but eventually I just went back to watching TV and I just sort of soon forgot about it. 2 hours later, though, I hear the doorbell ring again. Feeling a sense of nervousness this time, I turned down the TV volume. This time, too, I got up slowly and I snuck over to the piano room where I could possibly sneak a peek and see who was there. So I knelt down and slowly raised my head over the sill to see who it was. And at the door was a woman, dressed in all black. Black high heels, a plain black dress which came down to mid-calf, and an unusually large brimmed black hat, which was bizarre considering it was summertime and really hot. She had long, dark brown hair, though her face was covered by the brim of her hat. The only thing that I could really see were her bright red lips pulled up in an eerily wide smile. Beside her was a tall, buff guy wearing a dark suit too. I don't really remember much of his features except that he was definitely a Caucasian man and had a very serious expression. But what disturbed me most, though, wasn't so much the intimidating guy, but the sight of the woman who stood there, literally unmoving, smiling at the front door, which was yet to be opened. And it felt like a good solid minute before she finally took a step back and, without a word, began to walk down the driveway. The man followed her step. To this day, I'm not sure who she was or why they were there at the door in the first place, and whether they were the ones which had knocked at the door earlier, but needless to say, the deep voice calling, "I know you're in there," and the image of the woman in black was not one that I forgot quickly.
Valentine's Day. True horror story. Generally, people have fond memories when they think of love. But sometimes, there are such incidents in love that make people's blood run cold. Something similar happened with Chris and Amanda. This year, for Valentine's Day, they had planned a beautiful romantic getaway. On their way, they had to pass through a bridge in Vermont named Emily Bridge. It was nighttime, and Chris was driving the car. While driving, he suddenly saw a girl sitting on the road with her head down. Chris had seen her from a distance and stopped the car. But when he got out of the car, he didn't find anybody there. He thought he was hallucinating, so he got back in and asked Amanda, "Did you see that girl? I don't know where she went." Just then, a terrifying voice came, "Who are you talking about?" When Chris turned to his wife, he saw that there was another lady instead of her, and she looked terrifying. Her neck was twisted completely, and her hands and legs were crooked, as if the bones inside had broken. One side of her face was scratched, and she had a single eye. The girl asked Chris, "Why didn't you come to meet me on that day? Who were you visiting that day? Which girl are you talking about?" Chris was horrified seeing her. He got out of his car but slipped and fell down after hitting the car's door. The next day, he woke up in the hospital. He had a lot of scratches on his body. Amanda was sitting next to him, and Chris asked her what had happened last night. Amanda told him that he was behaving very strangely and doing weird things. The nurse in that room was watching Chris very carefully. She asked, "Were you guys crossing the Emily Bridge?" To which Amanda nodded yes. The nurse then told them that the bridge is haunted, and nobody goes there at night. It's believed that long back there was a girl named Emily who was madly in love with a boy, but her family didn't accept their relationship. So Emily told her lover that they'll commit suicide by jumping off the bridge and immortalize their love forever. But when Emily reached the bridge, her lover wasn't there. She waited for him for hours, but he didn't turn up. Dejected, she jumped off that bridge alone and committed suicide. Despite days of search, nobody found her dead body. It is said that her body is still drowned somewhere in that river. From that day onwards, she meets every man passing by at night and asks him a question. "Who are you going to meet? Why didn't you come to meet me?" Chris and Amanda were really scared after listening to this story. The nurse asked Amanda to let Chris rest for a while. Chris lovingly told Amanda that once he recovers completely, they'll again celebrate Valentine's Day. Amanda smiled and left the room. Just then, Chris noticed the ceiling fan where he saw Emily's spirit. She asked Chris in her daunting voice, "Who are you going to meet? Why didn't you come to meet me?" Do you like the story? To know more about this story and Emily, subscribe to our channel.
This is the story of David, who lived in a small town in the States. It was the night of Halloween, and everybody was busy celebrating it. Halloween night is celebrated in the memory of those close ones who are no longer in this world. For instance, family members, soldiers who died in the war, or people who contributed a lot towards society. It is believed that on this night, a passage opens between the real world and the world of the dead, and the people who remember that day come to meet their loved ones through that passage. David was also busy in the preparation of Halloween, and his Uncle Anderson had invited him over for dinner. Uncle Anderson's wife had been missing for the past 4 years, and since then he had been acting very strangely. David didn't like his uncle one bit, but he was very fond of his aunt, and that's why he decided to meet his uncle after 4 years. When he reached there, he was taken aback by seeing Uncle Anderson's condition. It seemed he hasn't slept for years. None of the light bulbs in the house were turned on, except one. David felt very uncomfortable over there. He was talking to his uncle when he heard someone in the kitchen. It sounded as if someone was cooking. This reminded him of his aunt, who always used to cook for him whenever he visited them. He asked his uncle, "Is there anyone else in the house?" His uncle quickly dismissed him by saying there was no one else. After a while, that lone light bulb started to flicker. When Uncle Anderson went to check it, somebody called David's name. "David, I had been waiting for you. What took you so long?" The voice was clearly of his aunt. "Auntie? Is that you?" In that flickering light, he saw the spirit of his aunt, who was standing right in front of him. Then the spirit quietly went towards the basement of the house. David somehow managed the courage to follow the spirit. When he reached the basement, the spirit was nowhere to be found, but what he saw was the most horrific thing he had ever seen. He straight away called the police and told them everything. He saw a statue of Satan, the devil god, and in front of it laid 4 rotten dead bodies. David started feeling dizzy and fell on the floor unconscious. When David woke up, he couldn't move. He was tied up on the chair, and Uncle Anderson was praying to Satan. David thought this was going to be the last day of his life. But fortunately for David, the police arrived just in time. The police arrested his uncle and managed to save David's life. After the interrogation, they came to know that out of the 4 dead bodies, one of them was his wife's. The 3 remaining bodies were the people who have gone missing from the city in the past 4 years. Every Halloween's night, Anderson sacrificed 1 life to Satan, so the devil god can make him immortal. That's why he had murdered all those 4 people. Maybe David wouldn't have lived if his aunt's spirit didn't appear in front of him at the right time. David took away all the bodies and gave each of them a proper burial. Since then, every Halloween night, he devotes his time in public service. Some things are unexplainable. One such mind-boggling incident occurred with a 21-year-old girl at Cecil Hotel in America. She checked into the hotel, but never managed to check out. Cecil Hotel was built in 1927, and since then it is believed the hotel is haunted. Many of the guests have committed suicide by jumping out of the room's window. Not just this. About 30 years ago, a serial killer named Richard Ramirez stayed here and murdered 13 people in his room. People say that his spirit still haunts the hotel. But one morning of February 2013, Cecil Hotel saw the unthinkable. The staff received a lot of complaints regarding the water supply. There was no water supply in some rooms, while the others complained of black, muddy water running from their taps. When one of the hotel staff went to the terrace to check for the issue, he found that the lid of one of the tanks was open. When he peeped inside the tank, he saw something that sent shivers down his spine. There laid a dead body of a girl immersed in water. The girl's name was Eliza Lamb. Eliza had bipolar disorder, and she was also suffering from chronic depression. People thought this might be the reason why she committed suicide. But there are a lot of questions that were left unanswered. All the doors that led to the terrace were closed, so how did she manage to reach there? And how did she manage to remove the lid of the water tank, which was very heavy to be removed, but all by herself? Nobody had been able to figure out what exactly happened. Some say it must have been a hotel staff who murdered her, while a different section of people believe that the spirit of Richard Ramirez killed her. Another interesting theory suggests that she was playing the elevator game. The night Eliza died, she was last spotted in the CCTV footage of the hotel's lift. In the footage, she was behaving very strangely. Initially, she seemed like she was hiding from someone, but then she saw someone in the corridor, and she went after that person. Maybe that someone was the ghost of Richard Ramirez. Or maybe she was hallucinating. Or maybe she saw someone from the other world, as per the elevator game. Elevator game is a method which people believe can take them to the world of the dead. You need a building with a minimum of 10 floors, where the person must enter the lift alone, visit each floor one after the other. During the game, a woman from the world of the dead will enter the lift, whom you are strictly not supposed to look at. When the person reaches the 10th floor, the lift opens to a different world, a world of spirits and ghosts. If the person forgets the way back to our world, the spirit of the person is trapped forever in the other world. Maybe that's what happened with Eliza. But no one knows for sure. Eliza Lamb's death has been a mystery to everyone. What do you guys think about this? Do let us know in the comments. If you want to know how to play the elevator game, subscribe to our channel.
Haunted Highway. My girlfriend and I were returning from our college friend's birthday party. It was quite late in the night by the time we left, and his farmhouse where the party was happening was located in the outskirts of the city. Even that night, the highway was deserted and no cars, apart from ours, could be spotted in the distance. I was driving the car and my girlfriend, Sonoya, sat next to me. I'd put on some music in the car so that the night's silence wouldn't haunt us. Despite the loud music, I felt really sleepy. My eyes got heavier, and it was becoming impossible for me to drive. Sonoya somehow kept me awake. She kept talking to me about something or other, but my mind didn't seem to follow. Suddenly, I dozed off. The moment I opened my eyes, I saw a girl standing right in front of the car. Before I could make sense of it, I realized I had ran over the girl with my car. I applied the brakes, but the car skidded and she came dragging along on the road. When I came out of the car to look, I found the girl's body was lying in half. Only her head, including her upper body, was remaining, and the rest of her parts were missing. I believe she lost the other half of the body in the accident. When Sonoya came out, she didn't find anything. My blood ran cold, and I quickly got into the car and raced away toward my home. I was now wide awake. After driving for a little while, when I looked into the rearview mirror, I was left stunned. I saw the girl's half-cut body is chasing the car, and then it suddenly disappeared. Sonoya wasn't able to see any of it, and I chose not to speak any more about it. The highway was about to end when I suddenly saw the other half of the girl's body. Her lower body was crossing by in front of my car. This time I summoned all the courage I had and decided not to stop, and the car went right through the walking legs. Out of nowhere, the girl's upper body fell right onto my windshield. I screamed and lost control over the car. The car lost balance and it turned upside down on the middle of the highway. Sonoya fell onto the road away from the car. That very moment, a truck was passing by at full speed. And before I could save her, the truck ran over her, cutting her body open in 2 pieces. I shouted with all my might, "Sonoya! Sonoya!" And soon, I fell unconscious. 2 days later, I woke up in the hospital. The doctors told me that Sonoya had died on the spot. When I told my friend about the whole incident, he narrated me the haunting story of Tiki Tiki. Since that day, every night, I get a dream where I see a girl coming close to me, crawling on her hands, and she asks me where the other half of her body is. I don't know whether the girl is Sonoya or Tiki Tiki, but every night listening to that terrifying question gives me the chills.
Teke Teke Horror Story. School ended and a boy named Daniel was going back to his home. On his way home, he always crossed a deserted house. People said that nobody lived in that house, but Daniel used to see a very beautiful girl standing by the window, staring at him every day. He sort of liked her. That day, when he was returning from school, he thought he'll enter the house to meet the girl and tell her how he feels about her. Like every day, the girl was standing by the window staring at Daniel. Daniel entered the house, walked up the stairs, and went to that room. When he reached there, the sight he saw totally came as a shock to him. He could see the pretty girl, but she didn't have a lower half of her body. From the window, only the upper half of her body was visible, but Daniel never knew that the upper half was all that the girl had. Daniel was so scared that he couldn't even run. Deep down inside, he had realized that it was too late to run. That is when the girl turned and crawled on her hands swiftly to come near Daniel. In a creepy voice, the girl asked Daniel, "Where is the other half of my body? Where is the other half of my body? Where is the other half of my body? Where is the other half of my body?" Daniel was in a state of shock and not a single word came out of his mouth. On the spot. In the decade of the 90s, many more incidents just like Daniel had been found. In every case, the victim's body was cut into 2 pieces from the middle, and the dead body was found in some deserted place. People named that girl Teke Teke. People believed that when she was alive, her name was Kashima Reiko, who was a very reserved girl. She was made fun of when she didn't talk to other people and mostly kept to herself. That is why people used to tease her and made fun of her. One day when she was returning home from school, a couple of boys pushed her down for fun at the railway crossing and left. When Kashima fell, her foot got stuck there at the crossing. A speeding train approached her and cut her body into pieces. She was still alive for a while and cried for help, but there was no one around who could hear her. Since that day, she became famous as the legend of Teke Teke. In the deserted places of Japan, she used to stop kids who were going back home from school and asked them a simple question. "Where is the other half of my body? Where is it?" People didn't know the answer to it, and Kashima then made sure they suffered the same fate as her. Do you like the story? Tell us in the comments section below and subscribe to our channel.
This is the story of 150-year-old City Theatre situated in an American town called Biddeford. In 1894, the theatre caught a huge fire which burnt down the entire building. 2 years later, the City Theatre was renovated and opened for performances. If the performers are to be believed, since its renovation, they felt a sort of suffocation every time they stepped onto the stage. Performers ran out of breath during practice, and they even caught glimpses of shadows of the dead people. All these occurrences had filled them with fear, but the incident of 1904 changed the scenario of the theatre completely. On the night of Halloween, a beautiful 33-year-old opera singer, Eva Gray, died on stage while performing. She had a sudden cardiac arrest and lost her life on the spot. It is said that since then, the spirit of Eva Gray wanders within the City Theatre. But Erica was totally unaware of all this. The year was 2016, and on the night of Halloween, Erica had to represent her college and perform a play. Her theatre group was allotted the Biddeford City Theatre for rehearsals. She reached the City Theatre way before any of her group members, and she thought she'll start rehearsing till they arrive. The theatre was humongous, but it wasn't well maintained. Not a single person was to be found in the huge theatre. Erica was a little scared being all alone in a theatre, but she tried to keep her entire focus on her performance. She was rehearsing for her part when suddenly she heard someone clapping. She looked towards the audience but couldn't find anyone. After a while, the chandelier in the centre lit up, and she could see a woman in the balcony staring at her. When Erica asked, "Who's there?" no one responded, and the woman disappeared from the balcony. Erica was startled, and she didn't know what was happening to her. She wasn't able to breathe properly, as if someone was choking her throat. She understood it's not safe to be here anymore, and she ran towards the exit. But none of the exit gates were open. Suddenly, all the lights in the theatre were switched on, and a piece of music started to play. The theatre now was filled with people. When she looked towards the stage, she found a scary woman singing. This was the same woman who was staring at her from the balcony. That's when she heard the gates banging. When the gates opened, her group members from college walked in. Erica turned back, and everything was back to normal, just like before. Neither was there anyone on stage, nor in the audience. There was no music to be heard, and even the chandelier was turned off. When Erica told this incident to her friends and the manager of the City Theatre, she came to know about the story of Eva Gray. Since then, Erica got too scared to perform on stage, and she quit her dreams of acting forever. People say that every year on Halloween's night, Eva comes on stage in the City Theatre and finishes her performance that she left incomplete on the day she died. And if someone stops her from doing so, she kills that person.
Ouija board. New Year. Mary's birthday falls on the 31st of December, the last day of the year. Usually, on this day at midnight, everyone celebrates her birthday and New Year together. This year, Mary's aunt gifted Mary a Ouija board. Mary's aunt knew that she loved horror movies and horror novels, and she also knew that a lot of people will be gifting her a horror novel. That is why she bought a Ouija board for her. Seeing the Ouija board, Mary screamed out of joy and ran to her room with the board. She also called a friend of hers to the room. They both started reading the instructions in the Ouija board box. It was written that after calling a spirit, it is very important to make sure that the spirit is sent back. Otherwise, the spirit possesses the person who used the Ouija board. Mary read all the instructions carefully, and she started using the Ouija board with her friend. They kept a glass at the center of the Ouija board, and both of them kept their fingers on the glass. They then asked, "Is there any spirit in this room?" In the beginning, nothing happened. But after some time, lights in the room started to flicker and the glass on the board shifted to the right, where it was written, "Yes." This made them really excited. They again asked, "Do you feel lonely?" And the glass again moved to the right over the "Yes" written on the Ouija board. They both were quite amazed to see what was happening, and they went on to ask all sorts of questions to the spirit. "Can you tell me what will the new year bring for me?" The Ouija board shook vigorously, and the glass moved on the alphabets marked on the board. F-R-I-E-N-D. Friend. "Can you tell me what will happen with my family in the new year?" The Ouija board again shook vigorously, and the glass moved to different alphabets. N-O-T-H-I-N-G. Nothing. This left Mary confused. She said, "How is this possible? There will be something that definitely happens with my family this year. Some events, some occurrences." The glass once again moved to different alphabets. D, E, A, T, H. Death. Mary and her friend got terrified seeing this. That is when someone called them from downstairs that it was time to cut Mary's birthday cake. Mary left the Ouija board the way it was and went downstairs with her friend. Mary was handed a knife to cut the cake, and just then all the lights in the house started to flicker. Mary's eyes turned completely red, and her mouth had become unbelievably big. She shouted so loudly that her jaw broke off and fell off her face. Suddenly there was chaos. With the knife with which she was supposed to cut the cake, she started stabbing all of her family members and the guests present in that room. Her friend suddenly shouted, "We didn't send the spirit back. She has possessed m-" And before she could complete her sentence, Mary stabbed her with the knife. All the remaining guests started running from there. After that, Mary, or whoever it was inside of her, came back to her room and started playing with the Ouija board. That lonely spirit finally got a friend in Mary, and whoever thought of coming in between the spirit and Mary, that person was put to sleep forever.
You must know about the Arsenal Football Club. But do you know that the Highbury Stadium, which was home to Arsenal for over 90 years, is considered a haunted stadium since 1934? It is believed that about 80 years ago, Herbert Chapman lived in that stadium. That time he was the manager of the Arsenal Football Club and is credited with the transformation of the Arsenal team into a dominant one. Herbert was the one who made a lot of changes in the ground and made it a world-class facility for players. But in 1955, Herbert died of pneumonia, and it is said that his spirit still roams in the ground. Oblivious to Herbert Chapman's story, a 16-year-old boy named Dave, who aspired to become a footballer, used to practice almost every night at the Arsenal's Highbury Stadium in London. Once Dave was practicing for an important match of his all by himself. It was quite late in the night when he suddenly saw a shadow following him from behind. He could no longer concentrate on his game, and just then he heard someone's voice from behind. The voice said, "You're doing it the wrong way." When Dave turned behind, he saw an old man sitting in the stadium. The man looked very weak and pale. He had deep, dark circles, and his face was scratched at many spots. He had a few balding patches. He got up from his seat and came towards Dave. Dave was slightly scared, seeing the man approach him. He left his football on the ground and started walking towards the ground exit. The man shouted again, "You don't want to play for Arsenal?" At this, Dave got frightened and started running away, but his football came flying by and hit him on his back. When he got up and turned, he saw the man standing right in front of him. That man held Dave's hand tightly. Dave was startled, and he started pushing the man to free his hand. The moment the man was pushed, he fell on the ground and disappeared. It was as if the ground swallowed him in. Seeing this, Dave quickly ran to the ground staff and told him everything. On listening to Dave, the ground staff smiled and in turn told him the legend of Herbert Chapman. He even told that lots of ground staff members and a few footballers have witnessed Herbert's spirit playing on the ground or just sitting in the stadium. Dave was shocked after finding about Herbert Chapman. He was about to leave the ground. When he saw the man again, he was standing right in the middle of the ground facing Dave. In 2006, the ground was renovated into a residential complex. People say that Arsenal's former coach, Herbert Chapman's ghost, still roams in the garden over there. What do you think? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Bloody Monday for chilling stories every week.
This story is about a girl named Olivia. Olivia had gone through a breakup a few days ago, and since then she had become quieter than usual. She turned all her focus towards her work and started spending late hours in the office. Valentine's Day was approaching, and all her friends had planned a trip to Malibu along with their partners and asked her to join them. Olivia made an excuse for work and got out of it. She was a bit sad that she was going to be all by herself on this Valentine's Day. Like any other day, Olivia was working in her office on the 14th of February. After a while, she got tired and decided to go to the nearby coffee shop. There, she met a guy who looked very similar to her ex-boyfriend, and they both started talking. Olivia was attracted to him, and after spending some time together, they both decided to head to a club in the evening. They both danced and partied all night long. After a very long time, Olivia was finally feeling good. The guy asked her to come to his place afterwards, to which she agreed. Olivia was quite drunk when she reached his house, but she could still sense something weird about that place. There was a strange smell in the house that made her uncomfortable. However, she trusted him and went to the bedroom. Soon, they got closer and hugged each other. While they were hugging, Olivia felt as if the guy bit on her neck and she immediately pushed him away. She saw that the guy's face had changed completely and turned into a monster's face. Olivia was startled and the guy started approaching her. She was scared and wanted to run for her life but fainted out of fear. When she woke up the next morning, she found that the guy was gone. The entire face of the place had changed. That house had turned into a dump house, and it seemed as if nobody else had lived there for years. She immediately left that place and went to a friend's house. When she inquired about the guy, she was left stunned. Upon asking the coffee shop owner about that guy she was with that night, she found there was no such guy with her that evening. The coffee shop owner added they were wondering who she was talking to in the first place. Olivia couldn't believe all this. She went straight to the club after that to inquire about that guy. The manager showed her the CCTV footage in which she was seen dancing all by herself. When she tried to find out more information about that guy, she came to know that the guy had passed away 2 years ago. She was in a state of shock and still couldn't come to terms with the fact that the guy she spent the night with didn't exist at all.
The confusing yet interesting thing is, the wound mark on her neck is still there and keeps reminding her of that scary night.
My name is James, and this story is about an incident that happened with me when I was a 17-year-old boy. After a lot of hard work, I was admitted to a prestigious university, and I was ecstatic about it. I had left my village for the first time, and it was a whole new experience for me to be in a big city like Boston. I usually spent my time studying in the library. One day, while I was taking a book from one of the shelves, I saw a horrific face on the other side. I screamed out of fear, and the book fell from my hand. Listening to my scream, a girl quickly came to me and asked if I was okay. When I turned back, I was blown away by her sight. The girl looked ravishing, and I was enchanted by her beauty. The girl once again asked me if I was all right. I just nodded, and both of us started talking. We started meeting every day in the library and studied together. I'd fallen head over heels for that girl. We used to talk for hours in that library. But one day she suddenly disappeared. When she didn't turn up in the library for a few days, I started looking for her in the entire college, but I couldn't find her anywhere. On further investigation, I came to know that no girl of that name ever studied in that college. I then went back to the library and asked the librarian if he knew where I could find that girl whom I sat and talked with for hours every day. What he told me left me shocked. He said that he never saw anyone in the library with me. I was stunned beyond words. And then I heard that girl call my name. The voice came from the same section of the library where I had met her for the first time. The girl stood there facing toward the shelf. I asked her, "Who are you?" The girl did not reply. I hesitantly went further ahead and once again asked who she was. That's when the girl turned towards me. Her face had become totally different. It was as if I saw a horrific witch, and I soon fainted. After that day, I never went back to the library. That day onwards, I believed the library was haunted by the ghost of that girl. On special request, I was able to get a transfer to a different wing within the university, and I never saw her again. But I'll never be able to forget that face. Ever. Do you like the video? Subscribe our channel, Bloody Monday, for spine-chilling horror stories every week. And don't forget to press the bell icon for the latest notifications.